The Australian Financial Review attacks any critics of the cash ban. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian Heise here, and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. I've got my morning stein of coffee, and I thought we'd have a look at another article from the Australian Financial Review, essentially a follow-up to the previous one they did attacking Martin North. And it's the cash ban brings out conspiracy theorists. Now, I see what they're writing here is a really good opportunity to introduce people to some concepts they may not be familiar with. And I am going to, as a proud YouTuber, give a shameless plug for my Amazon affiliate link, because people have been purchasing these two books I've been recommending, and it helps out the channel. But they're fantastic books, and they're by Robert Cialdini. And the first one, or the most recent one, is Pre-Suasion, and his other one is Influence. Now, Pre-Suasion I bought on the Kindle, and I was, read through it, and it is a really good book. It deals with how people, they use different techniques, verbal cues, other strategies to frame a situation and to persuade you, to influence you. One example is, say you're negotiating a price with someone, and a strategy to do is to set the peg it high. So if you're negotiating a price for a product a service you want to provide, you say, oh, it's usually worth this much, I'll do it for $20,000 normally for these clients, but because you're a mate, I will give you this much of a discount. You pegged it at high, so psychologically anything else you say after that point is lower. So you'll think, oh, that's a big saving. You'll see the difference. Even if the new price is what the person originally wanted and it's quite high, you'll still feel like it's a saving. The same thing happens whenever anyone wants you to put an offer on the table. How cheap can you do it for, or this. It's the same type of thing. It's about controlling the argument and persuading you and setting pegs and things like that. That's one example. The other one, this other book, Influence, it's quite good too. I actually listened to that on audiobook. I know it's cheating, while I was doing Uber. So while I was driving around, because I know one gentleman who was doing Uber and is trying to get out of it, used it as an opportunity to learn these things. It was a good book, a very good book, quite interesting. And this is an older one, and he followed it up with this one. So I would highly recommend these, and the links to these two books will be down below, because a lot of that is flowing through into what we're seeing here. And right away, right at the beginning, it's here in the title. Cash ban brings out conspiracy theorists. Now, whenever you hear the term conspiracy theorist, you think of some nutter in a little shed, probably smelly or whatever. It's a way to poison the well, frame the whole argument, and to disparage the people that they're talking about right off the bat. What about, how many times have people read corrections when the conspiracy theorist has been proven right? We all remember hearing about people going paranoid about, your kettle and your TV will monitor you and will record you, and that's been proven right now because there's technology there that allows it to happen. How often your phone will take sound samples of words and then use that to display advertorial information. I think Skype calls were recently monitored as well. So, yeah, you got to. I'm skeptical often. And it's a lot of fun to dive down these complex conspiracy rabbit holes. I lean more towards incompetence. I think incompetence, if you just hold that incompetence and then people taking advantage of situations that arise. So that's how I frame things. Usually the simplest solution is correct. But this is done intentionally. It's titled intentionally. So, was KPMG's global chairman behind a secret plan to control the economy through a ban on cash purchases over $10,000? So, could someone let me know, has the Financial Review, have they written anything else about this cash ban? Is this other than the piece they did on Martin North, is this their first piece they've done about it? The first introduction that people are going to get to it that read this media piece? Because a lot of people still don't know about the cash ban. And how many people will just read these two things and make up their mind? That's the problem we have here. So, once again, Canberra is awash with wild theories about power, domination and control. This time, though, they originate outside Parliament House. So he's framing it good. He's framing it good. Wild theories. Come on. Yeah. One of the biggest changes in the way regular Australians can use cash a ban on most transactions over $10,000 will be proposed to Parliament in coming months, according to Assistant Treasurer Michael Sukkar. The plan is opposed by the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, CPA Australia, and the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, which regards it as an infringement of civil liberties. So, here you go. This is it. This is where he needed to stop. That's it. That's the whole article right there. It is fundamentally an infringement on our civil liberties. It's a freedom taken away. Even if you don't use cash in business. Rarely use cash because it's a pain in the ass. It's just the fact that the government is using coercion and control and threats of, restricting your freedom and fining you to enforce you to comply with it. That is a civil liberty lost. You may think, no, I never have to deal with that. It's not, I just use my card all the time. What are you worried about? That's fine. You can have that opinion. But do you want to hand over that authority to the state? That's the fundamental problem here. And so many people are just rolling over and going, yeah, I don't care. Which is, I'm starting to see that change a little bit. More and more people in Australia are getting frustrated, and average normal people are becoming more politically active. But pieces like this, framing criticisms all as conspiracy theorists, is concerning. Because these are legitimate criticisms of government taking away the right for you to spend your own money how you want. It's that simple. And I mean, this article goes off into frankly some embarrassing tangents that you wouldn't expect from an Australian newspaper, or maybe just my naivete. We're heading down the same road of America, where people are writing just, interesting hit pieces for the sake of it. I mean, hey, hell, it's clickbait. They need to do what they got to do. So here we go. But the most aggressive resistance, and possibly the most effective, has come from a notorious far-right political party, the Citizens Electoral Council of Australia, which has worked with a high-profile property pundit and an obscure economist to promote the idea that the anti-money laundering measure is a profit and power grab by bankers. Okay, so let's pull this apart. First up, they're calling the CEC far-right. What does that even mean? Far-right political party. I think now's the time, a good chance. Or they're also, they're calling property pundit and obscure. So notice the terms that he's using. But let's have a look at the political compass. Now, this is a website where you can do a simple political compass test to see where you sit. Traditionally, they'll say there's, left side of politics, all the hippies, the greenies, and the far right over there. It's actually off. Wait, I've got to draw it here. The far right over here, so you can see it on the screen. But notice how they're using the term far right. Far, it's away. It's right. It's bad. Bad. These images of you in your mind, but it's outdated and it's not appropriate anymore. So let's have a look at this political compass. So I think this is if you're not familiar with this, I think it's important for you to learn and to talk to people about it, because I think it's got more to do with authoritarianism and individual liberty. That's what's most concerning. So, in the introduction, we explained the inadequacies of the traditional left-right line. If we recognize that this is essentially an economic line, it's fine as far as it goes. We can show, for example, Stalin, Mao Zedong, and Pol Pot, with their commitment to a totally controlled economy on the hard left. Socialists like Mahatma Gandhi, Robert Mugabe would occupy a less extreme leftist portion. Margaret Thatcher would be well over to the right, but further right still will be someone like the ultimate free marketer, General Pinochet. That deals with economics. But the social dimension is also important in politics. I'd say it's more important. That's the one that the mere left-right scale doesn't adequately address. So we've added one ranging in position from extreme authoritarian to extreme libertarian. So this is how they are arguing the compass goes. You've got the left-right, which is the economic scale, and then you've got the up-down, which is the social scale. So you could be a far-right authoritarian. So you have maximum economic freedom, laissez-faire freedom, but you've got so much social control that you're an authoritarian. You could be a far left authoritarian as well. A lot of a lot of economic controls, but, far left authoritarian is both social and economic controls. That's just terrible. In both regards, you could be a far left libertarian with very little social controls, but hard left authoritarian economic controls. And different parties will be all over this spectrum. You can do the test and kind of see where you sit, which political positions most adequate. So saying someone is far right, what does that mean? Where does that mean? Are they far right libertarian right? Are they far right authoritarian right? What is their position on the social scale? And is One Nation and some of the parties that they're calling, they're far right? So who's he referring to far right? Or the CEC? Are they far right? Where do they sit on authoritarianism? What influence do they want to have on the social scale as well with regards to liberty or to, other aspects? So it's an outdated premise. So both an economic dimension and a social dimension are important for a proper political analysis. By adding the social dimension, you can show that Stalin was an authoritarian leftist, i.e. the state is more important than the individual, that Gandhi believing in the supreme value of each individual is a liberal leftist, while the former involves state-imposed arbitrary collectivism in the extreme top left. On the extreme bottom left is voluntary collectivism at regional levels with no state involvement. Hundreds of such anarchist communities existed in Spain during the Civil War period. And how'd they go? You can also put Pinochet, who was prepared to sanction mass killings for the sake of the free market, on the far right, as well as in hardcore authoritarian position. On the non-socialist side, you can distinguish someone like Milton Friedman, who is anti-state for fiscal rather than social reasons, from Hitler. He wanted to make the state stronger, even if he wiped out half of humanity in the process. The chart also makes clear that despite popular perceptions, the opposite of fascism is not communism, but anarchism, i.e. liberal socialism, and the opposite of communism, i.e. an entirely state-planned economy, is not neoliberalism, i.e. an extreme deregulated economy. So you can see here. So this gives you a better understanding of where people sit on the political spectrum. And this was never taught at school. I mean, we're still, when it comes to individual liberties, you're still kind of screwed here, you're screwed here. Even here, you're losing a lot of your individual liberties on the social scale of things. But it comes down to where you sit on an individual. And so this is where the big issue is as well. Is how much state coercion is used to take away your individual liberties. And this cash ban is pushing us up to the more authoritarian spectrum. Regardless of what anyone says, it is the state imposing a restriction on the individual. It's that simple, guys. It's that simple. You can make all these arguments for it. Oh, but, Florian, it'll stop the criminals or it'll get that extra tax. Who cares? It's still a right that you are giving up, that you are knowingly giving up. It is an attack on your civil liberties. So here we go. So it is back to the article. It is drawn out the conspiracy theorists, says independent MP Andrew Wilkie. There is a view that is part of a grand conspiracy to control every aspect of your life, including transactions. Well, how many of our transactions are already tracked using AUSTRAC? How much control do you want the state to have? Even if Andrew doesn't think it's going to happen, it's not him who we need to worry about. It's the next generation or the next generation of leaders that uses this for other means. Once you give away a right, can you get it back? How easy is it to get back? How often do the government give up taxes? Can someone let me know when we get rid of that payroll tax? That'd be good. Isn't the Second World War over? The campaign doesn't look likely to succeed. The Labour opposition says it will probably support the law, which includes 2-year jail penalties. With Labour support, it will sail through the Senate. So there you go. That is an authoritarian coercion on you to behave, to do as you're told. Good little citizen, you know, behave. Don't spend more than $10,000 cash because it's bad. We say no. But the policy has become a useful attention-grabbing tool for activists on the fringes of public life to promote extreme theories to eager audiences in the unregulated world of social media. Now, this is an interesting term because I am growing a channel in the unregulated world of social media. Now, in this world of social media, particularly with YouTube, it may not be regulated by the state, but it's regulated by YouTube. And there are a lot of restrictions on, frankly, what they consider as commercially appropriate or what advertisers will use. So, I mean, I try and limit my cursing when I make my videos. And that's not just because of YouTube. It's also because when you hear a 2-year-old say the S word, because when you're on the phone talking to tradies and they copy you, it's cute the first time, and then it gets really embarrassing. I guess it's part of getting old and growing up when you have kids. But I'm not going to use sugar as a swear word. That you can get stuffed. So, you know, there is an element of regulation there, but he's using that word to disparage the social media or people who are critical or responding to what's being put out there. I mean, good on him. It's unregulated. It proves it's working, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Backbenchers have received emails claiming they are being enlisted in a secretive plot by the shadowy bankers who really control the economy. Some of the communications have been so abusive that the Treasury Department has decided to withhold selective submissions from publication. Well, let's have a look here. None of them have been publicized. Looking here, yeah. Right now, I haven't got, none are available. Have they been publicized? Does the AFR get them before the public? You tell me. And I mean, okay, of course, you're gonna get nutters. I mean, guys, it's the world we live in. You know, if you want to go conspiracy theories, just go down the whole. What is it? The whole lot of people that think every major public figure has had like a sex change operation. There's this whole group of them that like analyze photographs. And yeah, there's some nutters. There are some nutters. They commented on a video I did years ago when I first started out. That's how I discovered that community. They're pretty strange. So, the black economy. The $10,000 cash ban was proposed in 2017 by a task force headed by the late Michael Andrew, a former KPMG international, looking for revenue to close the budget deficit. Well, we don't need it anymore. We don't need it anymore. We have the budget deficit is gone. Haven't you all heard? Thanks to the iron ore prices, we don't need it. So what? Here's the thing. That shows you the whole premise of it is just to address a budget deficit. There you go. It's revenue raising. For that point alone, I'm annoyed about it. Maybe they should have looked at programs that they could cut, or efficiencies that they could get, or departments they could merge to find savings, rather than restricting a liberty of the bloody people. You know, at first the change didn't get much attention. Yes, well, because it was released at Friday at 5 o'clock by Treasury, really quite late, wasn't it? The rise of electronic payments has made cash redundant for many people, and the main group still relying on notes are older people and criminals. Notice how they combine criminals and older people there. Well, guys, you know, criminals also use crypto. I remember I was driving one Uber guy around and he was complaining that he used to buy all his pot from his dealer using Bitcoin. And I said, well, mate, there you go. That joint you smoked a few years ago is probably worth $20,000 now. How does that make you feel? So, I mean, come on. Do you want to ban diamonds? Because criminals can use diamonds to smuggle money around and wealth around? Only entities with an Australian business number would be covered. Individuals would still be free to use unlimited cash to buy and sell things. No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. This is wrong. between individuals, so one person to another person, but not from an ABN. So if you wanted to buy someone who has an ABN, you need to use a non-cash transaction. It needs to go through the system. So what's the point then? How's this going to stop the criminals if they're still going to be using cash to cash? Because do you think they put tax returns in with ABNs for their criminal spending? I mean, come on, guys. Look what we're giving up here. Andrews' committee estimated that up to 3% of the economy operated outside the taxation system. So what? It described it as an endemic cultural problem that fueled the drug trade, sham contracting, corporate phoenixing, visa fraud, identity fraud, and GST fraud. How is having this in place going to address any of that? I mean, yeah. Then a little-known economist who had worked on the staff of Liberal Party Senator Arthur Sinidonis 6 years ago, John Adams, and a prominent property bear, Martin North, began drawing attention to the plan through their YouTube show In the Interest of the People. The new restriction was an almost perfect fit for the banking industry paranoia of the Citizens Electoral Council. Yes, it's paranoia for the CEC to be concerned about the banking industry. Didn't we just have a royal commission critical of the banking industry and all the objectionable practices that they did? How many 60-minute reports do we need to get about, ComInsure dodgily signing people up for cover that didn't adequately meet their needs and then screw over people? It's okay. So I think the author maybe needs to do a bit more research into some of the questionable behavior of the banking industry, guys. They're not all the good guys. What about the farmers that get their farms revaluated even though they're making all their repayments and lose everything? Is it paranoid to worry about that? Someone tell me, please. Please. I think it's sensible to be concerned about the banking industry, particularly when this cash ban will force a lot of people into using it. So here we go. The local offshoot of the American Lyndon LaRoche organization, a proponent of the infamous theory that a global Jewish-led cabal controls the world's banking system. So this is where he's trying to make links, anti-Semitic links to the CEC, and also linking Adams and North to him through this. I mean, okay, cool, LaRouche is dead. It's people have theories, and the Jewish banker stereotype, isn't that a bit outdated, guys? Come on. The party embraces both North and Adams. North's public profile: he appeared as recently as Sunday on the ABC National News as an economic expert, made him a potent messenger. Adams' background in Liberal Party politics gave him credibility the CEC didn't have. Adams agreed to appear on the party's regular internet TV show and spoke at seminars run by the group in Perth, Melbourne, and Brisbane. North invited a representative of the party to talk about the cash ban on his regular YouTube video, which usually focused on property prices and praised the party's work. Okay, what's wrong with that? There's some serious issues with this ban. It is, as I said, an authoritarian statist act that is taking away our individual liberties, regardless of, and we'll go into the links between this party and the CEC, regardless of those links. I mean, who cares? It's some American guy that most Australians wouldn't even give a damn about. What's important is that you could potentially go to jail for spending your own money in our country. That's the thing that matters. This is just framing. He's intentionally framing and creating links to try and disparage the people who are critical of this legislation, to undermine any public opposition to it. That's what he's trying to do. That's what he's trying to do. So collaboration and connection. The CEC, the Citizens Electoral Council, is pleased with the collaboration and happy to confirm its connection to both men. A spokesman said the CEC collaborates with Adams and North on our common ground. A concern that the financial system is based on a debt and real estate bubble, which is heading for collapse. and the need for structural reform to the financial systems, starting with a Glass-Steagall breakup of the banks. So, on August 1, North published a video interview with CEC spokesman Robert Barwick. Both men alleged that cracking down on tax evasion was a ruse for a darker agenda. See here how he's dropped the word darker in there as well. It's all framing, guys. It's all framing. It's done with intent and purpose. Because honestly, if you're watching this show, you're not going to be too surprised of what's happening here, what they're writing here, and the intention behind it. But it's the people who will be sitting at the Brisbane Club, just reading the Fin Review, having a coffee before a meeting, and and looking this, what these nutters, reading 2 paragraphs, tossing it aside. And then, we get another right that disappears. And then you get to the point where, you've got some European countries where you can't even spend $1,000. Guys, you can't even take $1,000, put it on the table. I mean, come on. There's nothing really bad about the black economy, Oz said. There's something much more fundamental going on. The vast majority of the activities that damage the economy are done by corporations. They're assisted by these accounting firms, the Big Four, Barwick said. Everybody knows this. Every scandal going back for decades has involved those firms giving banks, especially, and those corporates a clean bill of health. Well, yes, we've seen that. We've seen that again and again. Look up Enron, guys, if you're not familiar. Look up the crash of Enron. There's some really good videos on YouTube there. How just the dodgy accounting practices they did, that was all approved. They would record, once they signed a deal for $50 million, they'd write it in their books instantly that they got that money, even if it was for years in the future. And then when it all fell through, they'd still keep it on the books. They were literally cooking the books. And they were getting ticks off by the big accounting practices. So, to claim that this hasn't happened is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. It's just most people don't bother looking into it because we're Australia and, we don't care. That's what it is. I mean, come on. How can the author even be critical of that statement? There's evidence it happened. The broadcast posted on August 2nd has been watched 138,000 times, making it one of North's most popular videos. The doubts raised by North and Adams were so effective that mainstream media outlets began to pick up the story, Adams says. The ABC published an article on August 20 that said the change could create an Orwellian state by giving authorities greater control over people's finances. Well, yes, because you could go to jail if you spend 10 grand and someone has to dob you in. How isn't that Orwellian? How? A week later, it followed up with a report citing Adams as the primary source that suggests the policy was designed to allow the International Monetary Fund to influence the economy. As the federal government moves to ban cash transactions above $10,000, there's a theory gaining traction that the real motive for the cash ban isn't the so-called black economy, but rather to give authorities greater control over your behavior during recessions, the article said. Well, yes, that's the thing. The theory behind it is, with modern monetary policy, if it's difficult for you to spend cash, then if we happen to get negative interest rates like a lot of countries have, and European Central Bank has, then you will start losing revenue or interest on your savings in the bank. It allows for easier control than implementing a digital currency and a physical currency and all these exchange rate things. That's just because it's a theory and it's been written in IMF papers as modern monetary policy doesn't mean it's a conspiratorial. It means that could happen. Okay, I honestly don't think it's the plan. I don't think that's the intention. I'm more leaning towards this is all done with good intentions, or supposed good intentions, but that would be the inevitable risk that would happen in a couple of years' time when we get a whole new bunch of politicians and times get tough. I mean, who would have thought 30 years ago that negative interest rates would exist? Who would have thought that? You would have been laughed out of any room. So there's nothing wrong with maintaining. Okay, suppose even 3% of the economy is using this cash. would you be willing to sacrifice that deadweight loss of that 3% of the economic activity, which still flows around? That money isn't disappearing. It's still flowing around and causing productive portion of GDP. It's just the government isn't taxing it. Would you be willing to sacrifice that to ensure, as a civilization, we had a hedge against the risk of modern monetary policy implementing harsh negative interest rates, thereby protecting senior members of our civilization? There's the question for you. Let me know what you think in the comments. Regardless of even if you use cash, that is fundamentally what the point is. So, a columnist for The Australian, Catherine Grace Kelly, echoed the argument, which asserts that restrictions on cash will coerce bank customers to keep their money in accounts even if deposits rates turns negative. Well, yeah. Once it is passed, it is all over for the people of this country in terms of freedom and liberty, Kelly wrote on August 31st. Yes. Yeah, it is. Guys, it's that simple. All this other stuff that they're using to attack the people who are critical of it it's just it's pointless. It's utterly pointless. I mean, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to the fundamental proposition here that we're giving up a liberty. We are giving up a right that we have. What are we getting for it in return? If you have to give something up, you'd want something back. Where's the deal? Where's the back and forth? Okay, so they've pegged it at $10,000 limit, and you could go to jail for 2 years. Okay, let's put them something back. How about $250,000 limit? $250,000 limit. How about that? Let's go back and forth. Let's negotiate. No, there's no negotiation. So, setting the media agenda. Adams was delighted with the coverage. North recorded a video predicting that other media outlets might follow. Journalists at the ABC watched our analysis and decided to report on the proposed legislation. Given the strong public reaction Martin and I were able to generate with our reporting, Adams said. The ABC points out that it has also quoted other far-right groups that oppose change, including One Nation and the Institute of Public Affairs. Now let's go back here to the political compass. He's quoting it One Nation as far-right and the IPA as far-right. So, I mean, I wouldn't consider One Nation far-right. I think they've certainly got some right-leaning policies, but they've also got some left-leaning policies too, if you break them down. The IPA, they're more libertarian-leaning, aren't they? More to do with economic freedom. What's wrong with that? Nothing's wrong with that. Nothing's wrong with that. The more freedom you have, the better off everyone is as a civilization. Okay, and if you don't believe me, look at history. And if you say it wasn't real socialism, it was. Okay? I honestly think collective activity can't work after a certain scale. I think at a certain scale, you get to the point where people are dehumanized and relationships are no longer personal, then it breaks down. It breaks down. We see that what happens when people are dehumanized, and it's the other. We see what happens there all throughout history. So, the cash economy, the federal government's move to ban cash transactions above $10,000, and the prospect of ordinary Australians facing fines and jail time are matters of obvious public interest, and they are the only impetus for the ABC reporting on this issue, a spokeswoman said. Yes, I think the ABC did a good job. I know a lot of people give them a beating, and rightly so for some of the stuff they produce, but they are completely right here. They are completely right. And the AFR linking all this other crap to this issue is going to just allow, disparage and attack the people who are critical of it. And it's flying in the face of public debate over a serious thing, a serious liberty that we are giving up. And it's kind of pissing me off a bit. Disingenuous. It really is. It feels very disingenuous on the part of the Fin. So even if the cash ban is introduced, which seems likely, the debate has provided the CEC with invaluable publicity for fundraising, which is one of its core skills. Last year it declared an income of $1.8 million, a huge sum for a party with no MPs. Okay, how's that relevant to this? I mean, good on them for doing it. So in Australia, Jewish groups have identified the party as a leading anti-Semitic organisation, which it denies. The Australian Israeli Review described in August how the party operated an intelligence unit in the 1990s that maintained a dossier on Jewish community figures, including Frank Lowy, Richard Pratt, Eisel, and Mark Libiller. I've never heard of these people. Can someone explain to me how the people from the 90s are relevant now? Maybe I'm too young. I thought the internet bubble happened in the 90s. That was the big thing. Then we had the GFC as well. So, okay, that's relevant to the cash ban. Because, how? Someone explain. Okay. So, and I've been to the CEC website. I did a video when I did my political day coverage, and I went through every Senate candidate or every member. I went through the CEC website. I didn't see anything anti-Semitic there or even extremely right-wing there. And I went through every party here in Australia. And one issue, you know, these Jewish organizations here in Australia, I've encountered them once or twice before, and it's usually to do with another liberty given up. And they're celebrating the anti-hate speech laws in New South Wales being implemented. I did a video on that a long time ago, and that's a concern there, where they are happily celebrating a reduction in people's liberty for perceived safety. That's the concern. On that circumstance, I understand why they were celebrating it, because it was some nutter religious guy was prophesizing rubbish on the street, and there was no way to actually apprehend him. But you'd think that'd be disturbing the peace, wouldn't you? But so still, that's my one concern, that the danger of these organizations, you know, the AIJ and these other ones, is that they're willing to sacrifice individual liberty for perceived safety. What happens with that? Then you get a growth in authoritarianism, and we're less safe overall. So, members of this unit carried out surveillance, taped phone calls, filed reports, adopting false identities, visited the offices of Jewish community students and left-wing organizations, and covertly recorded conversations that they had, the review reported. Yeah, okay. I mean, come on, that's in the 90s, guys. People are doing that now. Still. You know, you've got people getting into other... Now, I think, they're getting into Facebook groups for Antifa and all these other groups. They're sending stuff around. I don't see how it's relevant. It's kind of, yeah, whoop-de-doo. In 78, okay, we're going back to 78 here. And he's dropped the H-bomb, AH. Okay, who cares? So AH was put into power largely on the initiatives of the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Oppenheims, among other Jewish, non-Jewish financial interests, centered in the City of London. Okay, well, it's interesting how you've got the City of London, then you've got the actual city, and then you've got a separate city with financial. So there's a whole lot of messiness coming on in London. And what's that got to do with the cash ban in Australia? You know, let's just cross that out. It's kind of irrelevant. He's trying to chuck some damage on the CEC with people who most of us have never even heard about. So they're right to call this out. So notice how he writes all this stuff, and then he refers to North again. He's trying to link him to all these people. Tell me if you know any of these people. Are any of them important? Should I know about them? I mean, I did grow up in Melbourne then, but yeah, I'm just a pleb. So, North says he condemns all racism. He says he hasn't seen any anti-Semitism in his contact with the party, and he argues defends individual rights. Well, yes, that's what they're doing here. This entire point. I haven't seen any anti-Semitism either in my brief meetings with Robert and Adam. I mean, come on. So, I have no affiliation or financial relationship with the CEC, he said. I'm not a member of any political party. I do, however, care about civil liberties. They are right to call this out. Yes. Good one. Yep, 100%. So, Adam says he doesn't support any of the party's views. Sorry, he doesn't support all of the party's views and isn't a member. I've only known the CEC at a personal level since 2018 February, he said. The cash ban will be put into Parliament in the current session, which is due to run until December 5, according to Sukkah's office. As for whether it will allow government officials to control individual spending, independent MP Wilkie is doubtful, and he was a government whistleblower. No government I have seen is half clever enough to do that, he says. It's down here. So let's have a look at one more thing. I mean, here he's referring to a media post here by the Australian, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council. And what's interesting is the way that they've written this thing. They're jumping from now back to they're writing 2011, and then 2015, and then 95. They're jumping all over the place with their dates to create a narrative, and it's designed in such a way to lavish criticisms on an opponent organization, which, I mean, to be fair, it's all politics. This is what happens. But one criticism, or one really issue that the CEC talks about a lot is the Glass-Steagall Act. And I thought we should have a look through this act to get a bit of a better understanding, because most Australians will have no idea what this is talking about, what this means. And frankly, I didn't either until I started looking into it. So, because we're taught none of this at school. I mean, what's our history like? It's getting even worse these days. So in 1933, in the wake of the 1929 stock market crash, and during a nationwide commercial bank failure and the Great Depression, 2 members of Congress put their names on what is today known as the Glass-Steagall Act, GSA. This act separated investment and commercial banking activities. At the time, improper banking activity sounds familiar, doesn't it? Or what was considered overzealous commercial bank involvement in the stock market investment was deemed the main culprit of the financial crash. According to that reasoning, commercial banks took on too much risk with depositors' money. Additional and sometimes non-related explanations for the Great Financial Depression evolved over the years, and many questioned whether the GSA hindered the establishment of financial services firms that can equally compete against each other. We will take a look at why the GSA was established and what led to its final repeal in 1999. So, reasons for the Act. Commercial speculation. Commercial banks were accused of being too speculative in the pre-depression era, in part because they were diverting funds to speculative operations. Thus, banks became greedy, taking on huge risks in the hope of even bigger rewards. Banking itself became sloppy, and objectives became blurred. Unsound loans were issued to companies in which the bank had invested, and clients would be encouraged to invest in those same stocks. It's paranoid to be critical of the banks, isn't it? None of this sounds familiar, does it? Does it? No, not at all, no. So, effects of the Act. Creating barriers. Senator Carter Glass, a former Treasury Secretary and founder of the United States Federal Reserve System, was the primary force behind the GSA. Henry Bascom Steagall was a member of the House of Representatives and chairman of the House Banking and Currency Committee. Steagall agreed to support the act with Glass after an amendment was added permitting bank deposits insurance, creating the FDIC, or Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. As a collective reaction to one of the worst financial crises at the time, the GSA set up a regulatory firewall between commercial and investment bank activities, both of which were curbed and controlled. Banks were given a year to decide on whether they would specialize in commercial or investment banking. Only 10% of the bank's total income could stem from securities. However, an exception allowed commercial banks to underwrite government-issued bonds. Financial giants at the time, such as JP Morgan and Company, which was seen as part of the problem, were directly targeted and forced to cut their services and hence a main source of their income. By creating this barrier, the GSA was aiming to prevent banks' use of deposits in the case of failed underwriting job. The GSA was also passed to encourage banks to use their funds for lending to increase commerce versus investing those funds in the equities market. However, the act was considered harsh by most in the financial community, and it was heavily debated. So, building more walls. Despite the lax implementation of the GSA by the Federal Reserve Board, which is the regulator of US banks, in 1956 Congress made another decision to regulate the banking sector. In an effort to prevent financial conglomerates from amassing too much power, the new act focused on banks involved in the insurance sector. Congress agreed that bearing the high risks undertaken in underwriting insurance is not good banking practice. Thus, as an extension of the Glass-Steagall Act, the Bank Holding Company Act further separated financial activities by creating a wall between insurance and banking. Even though banks could and still can sell insurance and insurance products, underwriting insurance was forbidden. So, were the walls necessary? The new rules of the Graham-Leach-Bailey Act. The limitations of the GSA on the banking sector sparked a debate over how much restriction is healthy for the industry. Many argued that allowing banks to diversify in moderate offers the banking industry the potential to reduce risk. So the restrictions of the GSA could have actually had an adverse effect, making the banking industry riskier rather than safer. Furthermore, big banks of the post-Enron market are likely to be more transparent, lessening the possibility of assuming too much risk or masking unsound investment decisions. As such, reputation has come to mean everything in today's market, and could be enough to motivate banks to regulate themselves. Consequently, to the delight of many in the banking industry, in November 1999, Congress repealed the GSA with the establishment of the Graham-Leach-Bailey Act, which eliminated the GSA restrictions against affiliations between commercial and investment banks. With the passing of the Graham-Leach-Bailey bill, commercial banks went back to getting involved in risky investments to boost profits. Many believe that the additional risk-taking, in particular subprime lending, led to the 2008 financial crisis. Conclusion. Although the barrier between commercial and investment banking aimed to prevent a loss of deposits in the event of investment failures, the reason for the repeal of the GSA and establishment of the GLBA showed that even regulatory attempts for safety can have adverse effects. So what do you think, guys, regarding that separation? And can you see why the skepticism and the paranoia, as the author cites the CEC as having with regards to banking, might be justified? Might be justified. I mean, so this is a hit piece designed to attack anyone, the two main proponents who are critical of the cash ban, the one political organization that is critical of the cash ban, and seems to be towing the standard party line. I'm disappointed in Wilkie. To be honest, I'm disappointed in him, because I thought he would appreciate that our liberties are more important than the potential benefits of this restriction. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think. Has this changed your opinion? You think it's appropriate to be writing pieces like this, just slanderous, backed with no information? What do you think about the Glass-Steagall Act? And where do you sit on the political compass? Has that changed? Have you done the test? I'll talk to you all later. Take care.